Welcome to Preservation Oaks, the podcast where we invite you to step away from the bustle of everyday life. Settle in and relax, and take a moment to leave the familiar behind as we explore the hidden gems of America that preserve our cultural past. We call them our Preservation Oaks, and with each episode, we'll journey to a different corner of the country, where we'll discover the unique histories, landscapes, and communities that make up our nation. We'll visit with local museums, historical and genealogical societies. They are the stewards of these stories. They preserve the legacy of each place like precious pieces of fabric in a quilt that binds the freedom-loving, hardworking people in this country together. So, slow down, grab a beverage, open your mind, and let us take you on a tour of the fascinating histories and heartfelt traditions that lie just beyond the horizon. This is Preservation Oaks, where every story is a stitch in the fabric of our shared culture. Now, join our host, Sean Radcliff, as he uncovers another thread in the tapestry of America's heritage and what it takes to preserve it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Radcliff, and today we're tracking a topic that's quietly reshaping genealogy: divorce. You might not think it, but rising divorce rates, especially since the 1960s, are and in the future will make it trickier to trace female ancestors. Whether you're a history enthusiast or just curious about your family tree, this episode is for you. So stick around as we uncover how divorce is changing genealogy. I'm Sean Thomas Radcliff, coming to you from Salt Lake City, and you're listening to Preservation Oaks on MicroStream Radio, the podcast that connects you to the amazing history of museums, cultural institutions, and the people creating and preserving history across the United States. Before we begin, a huge shout out to all our listeners. We're so thankful for your support. You're helping us put a spotlight on the incredible people who protect and share our history. All right, let's get started. Historically, family trees have often been traced through male ancestors and their surnames. But that doesn't tell the whole story, does it? Finding information on female ancestors, especially those born between 1940 and now, requires some extra detective work. That's where the divorce dilemma comes in. Divorce rates in the United States have been steadily climbing since the 1960s. Think about it. When the 1960 census is released in 2032, and then the 1970 census and so on, tracing female lines will be even more challenging than it is today. To understand the scope of the issue, consider this. Just from 1960 to 1966, in those 6 years, over 900,000 post-divorce marriages occurred, bringing together nearly 1.3 million individuals who had previously been married to different partners. During this same period, many individuals didn't remarry immediately, leaving about 1.3 million genealogically unrelated ex-partners. Now, as we go forward a bit, between 1967 and 1977, approximately 2.6 million previously divorced individuals remarried, resulting in 3.1 million new marriages. These unions led to the birth of over 4.2 million children, and eventually these children produced around 8.4 million grandchildren. These extended family connections remain even after the dissolution of the original marriages. And each time a woman marries, she may have changed her surname, or she may have kept her surname or hyphenated it. You get the picture. It's a recipe for an unprecedented amount of genealogical brick walls. Let's dive into the history of divorce and how its rise, especially since the 1960s, impacts genealogy. Here are some key stats on U.S. divorce trends. In the 1960s, divorce was pretty low, around 2.2 divorces per 1,000 people. Marriages reflected post-war ideals. Many couples married young and had kids. In the 1970s, divorce rates soared with the introduction of no-fault divorce laws. By 1980, it peaked at 5.2 divorces per 1,000 people. The 1980s peak brought nearly 50% of marriages ending in divorce. Second and third marriages didn't fare much better. In the 1990s, divorce rates began to drop, thanks to shifts like delayed marriages and more cohabitation. From the 2000s to now, rates have steadily declined, now around 2.5 divorces per 1,000 people, with millennials marrying later and being more selective. And now let's take a look at remarriage trends. Around 60% of second marriages and 70% of third marriages end in divorce. By 2013, 40% of marriages involved at least one partner who had been previously married, according to the Pew Research Center. Women remarry at lower rates than men. As of 2015, about 64% of previously divorced women remarried, compared to 71% of divorced men. And many people divorce more than once. The likelihood of a second or even third divorce increases with each subsequent marriage. Here are some insights. Roughly 60% of second marriages in the U.S. end in divorce. This is higher than the rate for first marriages, which peaked at 40 to 50%. The divorce rate for third marriages is even higher, with around 70% of them ending in divorce. Each subsequent marriage tends to have a higher likelihood of divorce, often due to complex relationship dynamics, blended families, and unresolved issues from previous marriages. Many women experience more than one divorce, though the overall percentage of women who divorce multiple times is lower than those who divorce once. According to census data, about 40% of divorced women have remarried, and of those, some eventually divorce again. It's estimated that a sizable portion of women who marry multiple times will experience 2 or more divorces. To estimate the number of divorced women who have remarried, we need to look at the total number of divorced women in the United States and apply the 40% remarriage statistic to that figure. So step 1 is to calculate the number of divorced women in the United States. According to the United States Census Bureau, as of 2020 through 2022, just those 2 years, approximately 15 million women in the United States were divorced. This number includes both those who remain single after divorce and those who remarry. And now we apply the 40% marriage rate. If 40% of divorced women have remarried, then we can calculate 15 million times 0.40, which equals 6 million. So that means there's approximately 6 million divorced women in the United States between 2020 and 2022 who have remarried. I focused on women in these statistics because it's women who may change their surnames with each marriage, making it tougher for genealogists to trace maternal lines, creating dead ends in records, making the job of tracking family history much more challenging. Divorce not only complicates tracing maternal surnames, but it also often results in fragmented families, fewer shared addresses, and potentially fewer census records showing entire family units together. As divorce becomes more common, families may have become more mobile, and women might be recorded under multiple surnames within the same lifetime. This can increase the complexity of following a maternal line, especially if women remarried multiple times or records weren't digitized or properly preserved. The 1960 and later census releases will shed more light on these complexities, and genealogists will need new strategies to keep up. Now imagine trying to trace your female ancestor through all of that. It's like solving a puzzle with missing pieces. Thankfully, we have some new tools today, like DNA testing and online records, which can help. But still, tracing female ancestors requires real persistence and looking beyond the standard sources. Think court records, legal documents, and the like. And to help us navigate the divorce dilemma, I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Crisman Smith, a professional genealogist, author, writer, speaker, and educator with decades of experience. Now, our guest today, Crisman Smith, has been passionate about genealogy since she was just 10 years old. With over 4 decades of experience as a speaker, writer, and researcher, Diana has shared her expertise at conferences across the country, on land and at sea. She and her husband dedicated more than 20 years as lay librarians at the Family History Center in Westlake, Ohio, and she continues to teach and inspire genealogists through virtual presentations. Diana has authored numerous genealogical articles and books, including Finding Your Danish Ancestors, a primer for research and history, and has contributed to publications like NGS News Magazine, APG Quarterly, and Digital Genealogist Magazine. Her specialties include Midwest and Scandinavian research, methodology, and professional development. A past board member of several genealogical organizations, Diana was recognized with the APGQ Excellence Award in 2010 for her outstanding contributions to the field. With a wealth of knowledge and a deep love for family history, Diana continues to educate and mentor researchers at all levels. Please join me in welcoming Crisman Smith to the show. Diana, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sean.
Diana, I've set the stage for our listeners. Can you shed some light on the issue and how family history researchers can deal with the divorce dilemma as we move forward?
Absolutely. Thank you for that great introduction, Sean. It helps to put some things into perspective. And as I go through this, I'll try to point out some less common, but nonetheless important to recognize possibilities to watch for in your research and suggest some strategies. I recently attended a webinar about marriage, divorce, etc. I was surprised to see in the comments how many people had not encountered any divorces in their family tree. My experience was very different. My parents were divorced almost twice. I'll explain that later. My maternal grandparents were divorced when my mother was 7, and both immediately remarried to parties who were previously divorced from others. I was a lucky kid who grew up with 3 sets of doting grandparents. My mother-in-law was divorced 2 times, plus 2, I'll call them unmarriages. Again, I'll explain more on that later. The grandparents of my maternal grandfather's godchild were married 4 times and divorced 3 times to each other. They might have gone 4 for 4, but the judge in marriage number 4 stipulated that divorce was not to be approved again in that jurisdiction. So they had to stay married. There are a few divorces all the way back to my husband's ancestors in colonial Connecticut. I'm not going to get into that too much today, but at one point we'll discuss a little bit about where you would find something like that. Although divorce was less common before the 1960s, some of the things to watch for in divorce may also apply to the death of a spouse. When did divorces begin? Sean has given some history of divorce in the U.S., but here's some more information. Divorce has actually been around for thousands of years. The earliest recorded laws were written on clay tablets, allowing women to separate from their husbands under certain circumstances. The Code of Hammurabi is considered the first codified law regarding divorce, about 1760 BC. Many European countries legalized civil divorce in the 18th and 19th century. And in the United States, there are divorce records in Pennsylvania dating back to 1682. Maryland legalized divorce in 1701, and other states followed over the next 2 centuries. One of the things is the impact of religion on divorce. I understand one reason some may not be familiar with divorce is often religion. From more Roman times in 380 AD, when Christianity was first adopted, divorce was opposed by the church. Although there may be around it for those with political or financial connections, but preferably not using the Henry VIII solution for getting rid of unwanted wives. The Catholic Church still has rules regarding divorce and annulment. Other Christian faiths have varying degrees of tolerance for the practice. As a result, those who have traditionally Catholic families are unlikely to encounter divorce. I believe that culture has impacted information on divorce. Unlike my family, where it was generally known, although there were a few exceptions, divorce was often not openly discussed by other families of any religion, particularly the further back you go. But there are hints you might want or need to look for to recognize a divorce. Here are a few of the most common. If different spouses are listed in consecutive censuses, that may be a clue of a change. However, watch out for same name, different person, or even different name, same person situations. For example, sometimes the spouse may go by different names at different points in life, or depending on who talked to the census taker. My dad, for example, was known by his middle name to his family, by his first name to his Navy and business coworkers, and by his last name shortened to Chris, my maiden name is Crisman, by his first wife, my mother, and their friends. His second wife didn't like that, so encouraged everyone to call him by a diminutive of his first name. She called him Howie. Because of all these names, I could generally tell how and when a person knew him. The census names in this case for him might not be helpful. His wives, fortunately, did have different names, which they used consistently through their lives, although they did have the same birthday. Birth certificates, or even marriage or death certificates of children, may list a known parent, but with a different name for the other parent. It could be a similar situation to the census, or it may be actually a different parent for some of the children. Be careful with this. Sometimes the names were just recorded incorrectly, or you may say the same first name and the surname different for the mother. The record usually calls for the mother's maiden name on nearly all the records of a child, but once in a while it was mistakenly recorded as a previous married name. The death certificates of the 8 children of my second great-grandmother showed 3 different names for her. Her maiden name was only on one. The others had one of her 2 married surnames.
Ooh, I know my stepbrother's name was Roger, and everybody called him Bud. And they wouldn't even have thought of Roger if a census taker came around. It would have been Bud.
My father-in-law was the same way. His name was Virgil, but he went by Bud, except in the Navy. So all of that's a good clue, but be sure to reconfirm what's going on. And a good hint as you're figuring it out is to write yourself a research report explaining what you found, what questions it raised, what you researched to unravel it, and your final determination of what happened. Obituaries are often easy to find, and they're a good first step in your search to confirm death. However, you should then confirm with death or cemetery records, or the census mortality schedule if that applies, since the obituary is usually written by the family and is not an official record. I had some close family members contact me recently for help in writing their parents' obituary, knowing that I'm researching the family. It was amazing what I was able to provide that they had no idea. Birthplace, first job, school attended. They had asked, but the parent had never answered. So no matter who provides the information, obituaries may be wrong or missing information, or have misleading information. My own father's obituary is very misleading. I helped the funeral director write it, but so did my stepmother. She insisted that her children be listed as his children, even though I was his only child, and all 3 of us were grown and married when she married my father. But the obituary shows he had 3 children, with no indication that hers are stepchildren. The only clue is the son, since his surname is different. I objected, but she won. Military records may have hints about marital status. Look for all possible records, especially middle-aged males during times of conflict. I'll refer to soldier, but consider the same records for sailors. Start with draft records. These may give the name of a relative or someone who will always know how to reach you. Often this is a wife, mother, or sister. Occasionally it's a father or brother, but usually it seems to be the woman. Whoever's listed, determine who that person is and how he or she is related. Also check for military pension records. These will have name of spouse and often children with ages and other details about the soldier's civilian life. Read it all. Make notes and make sure you determine the relationship of everyone mentioned. Read all the depositions. They may give important clues. I found one gave the name and death of the soldier's mother. It was given by his brother. Another deposition listed the reason he knew the birth dates of the children was that not only was he the brother of the father, but his wife was sister of the mother. Another indicated that the soldier had married two sisters first, then the sister of his wife. Read all those depositions carefully. Next are the military personnel files, sometimes called the OMPF. These are a combination of the military life and the civilian life. If you have the opportunity to obtain these, be sure to look for things like the beneficiary record. If there's an update, it's a clue to probable death or divorce. Military service records are not as helpful since they're focused on the soldier's military life. If you have the opportunity, of course, look. The same is true of any other type of records you might find. I never overlook any opportunity for information in any area of a person's life. Other records may be available based on the time and location, but there are week-long courses to cover military records, often focusing on a single conflict. So it's a lot more than I can cover here. One great source I have found for divorce information is newspapers. When starting research on any person, I look for them at any time in any place and then narrow my search as needed. Remember, you want to find everything. Divorces were or are often listed in the newspaper, especially in the newspaper of record for that jurisdiction. That's usually the major newspaper in the biggest city in the area, but not always. Local laws may require that divorces filed and granted must be listed in that public record. You may also find mentions of divorce in the social or neighborhood column. They often publish such items. The juicier, the better. Then follow up to confirm with legal records wherever possible. Whatever records you find, be open to anything else that looks odd as you're researching. Note that's always the best practice anyway. Be alert to anything that's different from the norm or expected. Read a few other similar records from the same time and place to see if they're all similar. If there's something different, research it to figure out what might that mean or how did that happen. When I encounter a new record set that might be relevant to any of my family, I look to see if there are records there for anyone.
That's fantastic information. Thank you. You mentioned that different spouses in consecutive censuses could indicate a divorce. What other anomalies or inconsistencies in census records should genealogists be on the lookout for?
That's a great question, Sean. As I hinted, if a couple's reported spouse's name changes between censuses, they may have divorced, and this represents a new marriage. Here's some other ways to identify a possible divorce through the census. In 1850, 1860, 1870, and 1880, one of the questions asked was if the couple was married within the year. If that's checked, and there are children more than a few months old, check for prior marriages for either, possibly with another spouse, to be parents of the children. Or it could be that they were married recently, but the children were premarital. Even if there are no children, if the spouses are both older, I kind of use 30 as a rough guide. There may have been an earlier marriage for either or both of them. In 1900 and 1910, they asked for a number of years married. If the head of household and wife give different numbers here, look for another marriage for either or both. They should both have the same number of years, but they may have misinterpreted the question and answered with total years married. If she says 5 and he says 12, it's a good guess that he was probably married for about 7 years previously, possibly in more than one marriage. Now, she may also have been married previously, but answered the question correctly for their marriage. So if you see different numbers there, look into both of them. In 1930, the question is age at first marriage. Look at the age of each spouse in 1930 and see if they both claim to have been married about the same year. For example, if he says he was age 20 at first marriage and is now 60, that means he was married 40 years ago. 1890. And if she says age 20 at first marriage and is now 50, that means she was married 30 years ago, which is 1900. So the first marriage was probably not the current one, possibly for both of them. Another way to check, according to the instructions to the enumerator in 1940, persons separated but not divorced were to be indicated as married. If you suspect they divorced, look for a later divorce. Also look to see if both spouses and any children were in the same place or home in 1935. That's one of the questions on every line. If not, this may be a second marriage. Also look to see if you get lucky and the wife was on the line to answer supplemental questions. Those are randomly scattered on every page through the census. In column 48 in that supplemental section, it asks if she has been married more than once, to which they answered yes or no. A yes will obviously lead to looking for the previous marriage. Also, column 49 in that section asks the age at first marriage. So then compare that to her current age from 46 in the main listings. If it doesn't make sense, look for another marriage. In 1950, item 12 asked for marital status. The rules were married or widowed, widower, divorced, separated but not divorced, or never married. So note that persons whose marriage was annulled were to be listed as never married. Common law marriages were listed as married. So bear those things in mind as you look at those marital statuses. And in that same census, items 21 to 24 are the usual place of residence 1 year ago. This isn't as helpful as the 5 years ago question in 1940, but it may imply marriage within the last year, since in 1950 they didn't ask that question. And if you're lucky, one of the parents may be listed on one of the 6 lines of each page, which are designated for sample information. Those give a little bit more on the person on that line. And the last of these lines, the 6th of these, again, they're kind of random through the census, but the last of these on the page has even more questions, including item 36, which asks if the person was married more than once. Obviously, if they say yes, look for the prior marriage or possibly marriages. And remember, always read every column on every line for the household in every census, and a few at either side. I find lots of relatives that way. And just because someone is listed as widowed or widower, verify that the spouse died. There was often some social stigma to divorce, so parties would claim the widowed status to save face. Make sure the spouse actually died. So after looking at the census hints, do you think they divorced?
Probably. Hey, I want to thank you for that valuable information. You emphasize the importance of verifying that a spouse didn't die rather than assuming a divorce. What are the most common mistakes genealogists make when they assume divorce, and how can these errors be avoided?
Yes, it is very important to confirm whether the change is due to death before assuming divorce, since death was much more common. And as I stated, sometimes divorce was considered a social stigma. So some of the places to check to see if the person actually died was, first, the mortality schedule. That's referred to as a non-population census. These were separate schedules collected at the time of the census in 1850 to 1880 and any 1885 state censuses, which list the people who died in the year before the census was taken. This is meant to be the 12 months before, so be careful of making assumptions about not finding someone you expect. They may have died the previous year, but not in the right months. This will provide name, age, marital status, the month in which the person died, the length of residence in the county, and other details, often including cause of death. So look for the mortality schedule. And I always check the mortality schedule anyway, just to see if anybody's in it that I recognize. Cemetery records, do a search through Find a Grave, Billion Graves, GenWeb, Family Search, Ancestry, any other sites you like, the suspected county of death, or where the obituary indicates. Note that finding a burial will confirm the death, but not finding one is not confirmation they didn't die. It could just mean no one recorded the burial. I have one great-great-grandmother that I've been looking for her burial for 20 years. I think I finally have it, but it takes a while. Again, look everywhere. Family Search is free and has lots of death records. I strongly suggest looking for the image, not just the record, since the record in Family Search is a transcription or abstract, meaning the opportunity for error is introduced. And even more, there may be additional information to be gleaned from the context of the actual record, additional columns or questions or marginal notes, for example. Also, be careful in any website about just using the general search feature and giving up. Ancestry and Family Search particularly have wonderful card catalogs where you should also check. Look anywhere they might have died. So in the card catalog, look for that county, locality, and expand your search if you don't find it right away. Think of a pinwheel circling out. So go further and further from where you expect. You can find a listing of the record sets available and then either browse or search that set. Sometimes only one or the other choice is available. You can either browse or you can search. The Family Search Research Wiki is also a great tool to find records on Family Search and elsewhere, so use it frequently. The link to the wiki is under the Search tab. And Family Search also has their new full search text search, which is a great guide to finding things. Note that to get to this, you must sign in. Now, accounts are free, and for those who are hesitant, I've never gotten any spam in over 20 years with an account, so it's safe to use. Then look for the Family Search Labs and click View Experiments. Look at Expand Your Search with Full Text and try it. Or if you've been there before, go to Experiment. You want to play with it for a while to see what works best for you, but I've had some great finds. Also a few disappointments, but the number of records is growing daily, and it'll still take years to get everything available on this. Remember that it's usually handwritten records transcribed by artificial intelligence. So once you find an item of interest, read the original, which is also included in the database. Read the original word by word and make your own transcription. I always find errors, sometimes material errors. So I transcribe for myself. Now you can use the AI transcription as a start and then make your corrections to it, but make sure you transcribe every word yourself. And of course, don't forget to record the source citation along with a note where you found it and whether you used the AI transcription. Another place to check for death is probate. Obviously, if somebody has a probate record, they must have died. But read everything, especially dates, places, spouses, children, and other errors. There may be some great clues there to indicate additional children. Find out if the person died or if there was a divorce. Land records. Look for the sale of land by all family members, even long after the expected death. The children may have inherited the land and lived there for many years, or even generations, before selling. But when it's ultimately sold, it should indicate the provenance and give other clues. Not in relation to divorce, but in finding the next generation. I found an heirship petition, which was filed almost 30 years after the father's death. His wife, and sometimes one or more of the children, had continued to live on the farm all that time. The petition was filed when she was ready to sell and move to town. All the children had to agree to the sale, since they would otherwise be heirs entitled to a share. There were 5 boys and a girl. I'm descended from the girl. That was the first clue I had of her marriage in Nebraska, which was a new state in my research to that date. In addition to finding the parents of my missing great-grandmother, it's led me to trace that family all the way back to a Hessian soldier in the Revolutionary War.
Oh, cool.
So don't assume that land is sold or transferred ownership immediately after a death. It may just be the family's understanding of who's going to live there, as long as they keep paying taxes and take care of mama. This is particularly common when there's no will. And finally, tax records. When someone disappears from the tax records for a jurisdiction, which is usually a county, it will often show deceased, or the same property will be taxed the next year to a different person, or it may say taxed to the estate of the deceased person. He may also have moved, and sometimes that will show up as well. Other times it will just show up that he's disappeared from the tax roll, and you have to figure out what happened to him.
Wow, a lot of good information there. Now, you noted that newspapers are a good source of information on divorces. What are some key search strategies or phrases that genealogists should use when looking for divorce information in newspapers?
Well, that's another very good question. First off, I look for everyone in the newspapers, and I often find some fun surprises. I suggest you start with a very broad search. If it's not Smith, this works well. Between my family and my husband's family, we found at least 7 Smith lines in various times and places. Also Schmidt and every other common name for various countries. But if it is Smith, still start as broadly as you can. Maybe limit the years or the states, but don't limit it too much, because things tend to pop up where you least expect them. And don't forget to record everything you find for them, whether it's what you're looking for at this moment or not. Make sure you note it to go back. You never know when a mention of a visit to a family member in another town may lead to just the clue you need. I start with just the married surname, since both spouses may not be listed in an article. And if it's a divorce, they're both listed by the same name. It may not list the woman by her maiden name because she was no longer known by that name. Narrow it to the first initial of the husband's name, or the full first name, or his nickname. So look for John instead of Jonathan, or Dick instead of Richard, but try all of the above and anything else you can think of. Initials, whatever. Do look for a woman by both her maiden name and her married name. Again, the first name is negotiable, so I tried to avoid using anything there to see what I find. But if I have to, I will try all the variations of Margaret, Peggy, Mary, Marge, whatever might be appropriate, or just initials. I don't often use keywords since I do want to find everything, and every time and place lists things differently. But I do hope to find a listing of divorces filed and divorces granted in the newspaper for that area. They just may call it something else. I found my mother-in-law's last spouse's moving sale notice. It was just months after their divorce and indicated they, Mr. and Mrs., were locating to Arizona. Now, this is obviously Mrs. number 2. I suspect some of the items listed had been Mrs. number 1's, and Mrs. number 2 wanted them out. I also strongly came to suspect that the presence of Mrs. number 2 was the reason for the divorce of Mrs. number 1. Don't limit your search too much by time or place. I mentioned my parents were divorced almost twice. The first time they separated, and my father filed for divorce in Illinois. The divorce was granted, but there's a waiting period before it could be finalized by signing. During that time, they reconciled, and he was transferred to another state. So they moved together and never signed the Illinois divorce. However, within a year of moving there, they separated again. I remember my dad saying, if you want a divorce, you pay for it this time. My mother didn't really care, and she never did remarry. So about 4 years later, he met someone and filed for the divorce so he could remarry. He was married 25 years to each wife. I was able to get the documents for the second divorce from the courthouse. I have the first ones from my mother's files. It's not possible to get those divorce decrees from all states, but I did a lot of courthouse research in that area and was familiar with the procedures, was able to get to the right department with the needed information and obtain that divorce decree. Finding that there was a divorce was much easier than finding the decree. But finding the record that was a divorce is often all you really need. It will often list the cause that was given for the divorce. The local newspapers should have the legal notice, as mentioned earlier, but it may also be mentioned in other area newspapers, particularly if the parties or the family were well known in the area, or if there was a scandalous element to it. You know, newspapers love scandals. If you can browse the newspapers, you might find mention of divorce or sometimes separation preceding divorce in the obituary, a marriage announcement, crime reports, business notices, especially if the divorce impacted a business, if they were partners, or just the local news, which we always referred to as the gossip column.
Oh, fantastic. I know how you got so good at genealogy, researching a surname like Smith.
Yeah.
You have to be very detailed.
Yes, and all those divorces.
No kidding. Now, you mentioned that religious views, such as those of the Catholic Church, historically opposed divorce. How did these religious perspectives affect the availability and recording of divorces in different regions or time periods?
The Catholic Church has always strongly opposed divorce, as we often hear stated in the vows. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. However, exceptions could be granted in some cases, generally by allowing legal separation, which might be recorded in the church minutes rather than a specific section, or they could be granted an annulment. Legal separation would allow the spouses to live apart, but would not allow either to remarry or live with another. In order to remarry, the parties must obtain an annulment from the church. This would be in addition to a civil divorce, not in place of it in most places. Technically, annulment requires some defect in the marriage. Often this may be stated as one or both partners were not mature enough to understand the full intent of marriage, or one or both partners did not intend to be faithful, or were not open to having children. Mental illness or substance abuse were also acceptable reasons for annulment. When I was growing up, I heard that annulments were granted for failure to consummate a marriage. I didn't understand that at the time. In order to remarry in the Catholic Church, either the first spouse must be deceased or an annulment must be obtained. Otherwise, the church will view another marriage as the sin of bigamy. Legally, bigamy will cause the second marriage to be invalid.
Diana, would you like to take a break for a few minutes?
Yes, 30 minutes has flown by.
All right, listeners, we'll be right back after these important messages regarding the genealogy books that Diana Crisman Smith has published, which are available at heritagebooks.com.
Wonderful.
Are you searching for your family's past? Do you want to uncover the stories of those who came before you? If you're a genealogist, historian, or simply curious about your roots, then you need the essential resources from Diana Crisman Smith, author, educator, professional genealogist, and speaker, who has dedicated her career to helping family historians worldwide.
Diana Crisman Smith has published 3 genealogy books, 3 meticulously transcribed books, now available at heritagebooks.com, provide invaluable insights into the final resting places of countless individuals across Iowa. Shelby County, Iowa Cemetery Records, which was published in 2021, explores the records compiled by the WPA during the 1930s, meticulously arranged for clarity and ease of use. With details ranging from birth and death dates to military service records, this volume shines a light on those who shaped Shelby County's history. Next is Greene County, Iowa Cemetery Records, which was published in 2022, is a treasure trove for genealogists. Featuring tombstone readings from cemeteries across Greene County, this book ensures that the names and stories of the past are preserved for future generations. Every entry is arranged alphabetically, making it a must-have for family researchers. And published in 2024 is Wapello County, Iowa Cemetery Records, which was recently released. This comprehensive guide is an essential resource for anyone tracing their family's journey through Wapello County. With an easy-to-navigate format, this book provides a detailed finding aid, allowing you to locate ancestors with precision.
Don't let history fade away. Preserve your family's legacy with these expert-level books from Diana Crisman Smith. Whether you're a seasoned genealogist or just beginning your journey into the past, these books will become invaluable tools enabling your research. Visit heritagebooks.com today and bring the past to life with the help of Diana Crisman Smith.
Reno, Nevada was once known as the divorce capital of the world. It was the place where unhappy marriages came to an end quickly and discreetly. Beginning in the early 1900s, Reno became the go-to destination for those seeking a swift and simplified divorce, thanks to Nevada's uniquely lenient residency requirements. At a time when most states required proof of infidelity or abuse and lengthy legal battles, Nevada set itself apart by allowing divorces after just 6 weeks of residency, attracting thousands of people from across the country. This phenomenon peaked in the 1930s and 40s, with Hollywood stars, high society elites, and everyday Americans flocking to Reno's famous divorce ranches to wait out their 6 weeks before regaining their freedom. While Nevada eventually lost its monopoly on quick divorces as other states reformed their laws, the era of Reno's divorce industry lasted well into the 1960s. During each of our refreshment breaks in this episode, we're taking a trip back to 1943 with excerpts from a classic James A. Fitzpatrick travel talk film that showcases Reno during its heyday as a divorce haven. Originally produced as part of the Travel Talk series, this film provides a fascinating glimpse into Reno's unique role in American legal and social history. This video is available on YouTube on the Reno Clips channel. It's entitled Reno, Nevada in 1943. And now, let's listen as we step back into the Reno of the past.
It is said that 1 out of every 5 or 6 marriages in the United States ends in divorce. And the mecca of the disillusioned bride is Reno, the gay little metropolis of Nevada, which has become world famous through its association with marriage and divorce. A large portion of Nevada's population lives within a 30-mile radius area from Reno, and this fact, added to the ever-increasing number of vacationists and divorce-seeking residents who come here from all parts of the United States, may account for the rather ambiguous sign that arches the city's main street. The immortal wedding marches of Wagner and Mendelssohn become sadly distorted here in the hearts of the countless brides who come and go, freed of their marital obligations, but completely disillusioned in their dreams of conjugal felicity. Although much publicity and notoriety has been given to the part of Reno that is known the world over for its lenient divorce laws, it must be remembered that the divorce circle is composed of newcomers, and the average Reno citizens live much the same as any other group of Americans in a city the size of Reno.
And that excerpt is the first half of the classic James A. Fitzpatrick travel talk film from 1943 that showcases Reno during its heyday as a divorce haven. We'll include the final half of this short film during the next break, so stay tuned for more.
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Radcliff, and we're here today with Diana Crisman Smith, professional genealogist, author, writer, speaker, and educator, Let's pick up where we left off. Welcome back, Diana.
Thank you. Although I'm not familiar with all religions, I know that other faiths have differing views on propriety, availability, and impact of divorce. I am familiar with some of the other Protestant Christian denominations. But one example I discovered in my family, I encountered the Quaker view of divorce through my grandmother's sister. Now, I knew my Aunt Bessie and Uncle Kurt from my earliest memories. They lived near the family in the Midwest until I was about to start school. Then they moved all the way to Florida, along with Aunt Mary, another sister, and Uncle Vern. When I started researching my family at age 10, my mother didn't tell me that Bess and Kurt weren't actually married. I found that out when I couldn't find a marriage for them as I started documenting my family. After I was married, my grandmother told me the story. Kurt was married and separated from his first wife after 3 children before he met Bess. But she refused to grant him a divorce on religious grounds. He remained in contact with the family and provided child support, but did not return. My family was led to believe that she was Catholic and thus did not believe in divorce. When I got around to this family in my research a few years ago, I found that both Kurt and his first wife were birthright Quakers, not Catholic. But the Quakers were also not in favor of divorce, some branches more strongly opposed than others. Edith, his first wife, and the children remained in the Quaker faith. The 2 boys seemed to have left the faith when World War II came along, and they both served. Edith, however, remained a member her entire life. She died in 1991 at the age of 101. However, in 1974, she had moved to Florida, not near where Bess and Kurt lived, but in the state, and agreed to a divorce. Within a few days after it was final, Kurt and Bess were married after 40 years together.
Whoa.
Kurt died just 3 years later, but the happy couple were legally married at last. Oh, one little bonus. I've learned that Edith was related to my husband through his Quaker McGrew family. A very happy surprise. If you suspect there may have been a religious divorce or impediment to divorce, research the beliefs of the denomination and possibly the specific congregation. Also try to read the church minutes. There may be a mention there of a couple requesting a divorce and what the church told them. It could range from agreeing, requiring counseling, ostracizing from the congregation, or excommunication from the church. You never know.
Very cool. Just what people could use immediately there. You mentioned that bigamy can invalidate a marriage, thus eliminating the need for a divorce. In your experience, how common is this, and how can it be identified in genealogical research?
I don't believe it's very common. I've only encountered it once in my 25,000 plus person database. But when it pops up, it can be a doozy. My experience was when I was researching my mother-in-law's marriages. She was widowed with 2 small children. The youngest was just 1 month old when her husband died. This was in the 1960s, and a single woman's income was not sufficient to raise 2 boys. So she was ready for remarriage. The first one didn't work out. They were divorced after about a year. The marriage and divorce records were readily available through Ancestry and Family Search. Within a year, she married a second time. I was able to find the marriage record in another state without much difficulty. But this turned out to be a problematic union. I hunted for a divorce record for several years with no luck. And by that time, she was unavailable, so I couldn't ask her. I knew there had to be a dissolution of that marriage, since she married again within a year. I had no problem finding that marriage and subsequent divorce, which was in a 3rd state. So now I had her married twice with no intervening divorce. I decided to research that 3rd spouse more carefully. I was able to find his birth, confirmation, first marriage, births of several children, then the marriage in question. I kept searching and found his death and obituary. I didn't find a divorce in there anywhere for either wife, but his obituary listed his wife from that first marriage and the children, and that they were together for however many years, which was from the time of his first marriage until his death. And they were buried together back in the state where my mother-in-law was initially with her first 2 husbands. All evidence I have found points to him separating from his first wife and children, going to another state to marry a second time, It appears that she found out within just a few months and called him on. I've consulted legal information for both states, bigamy laws, and several lawyers. It all points to this. The marriage was never valid since he already had a living spouse with a valid marriage, even though it was in another state. To dissolve a marriage which didn't exist required only that she walk away, which she quickly did and returned to the first state. It was about a year later that she married her next husband in a third state. They were together about 8 years before they divorced. Those records were not difficult to find. That's the moving information that I found where I talked about wife number 1 and wife number 2.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So she was never again legally married after the wife number 1, 2 issue. I first met her when I was engaged to her son, and she had a new man living with her. They both believed that their state recognized common law marriage after 7 years. So we were all counting the months. I have since found that that ended in 1905 in that state, but none of us knew it at that time. So in 6 years and 10 months, he left. 4 months later, he married someone else. Her son was so mad he cut the dude out of our wedding pictures. He was in the wedding party.
I was once researching for a client and found that one of his ancestors back in the 1840s, 50s, right in there, jumped between Canada and the United States, marrying different women.
Yeah. Well, I have one that I suspect may have a bigamous marriage that I haven't finished researching yet, but he may have thought that it was legal because he married 3 or 4 women in Utah.
Oh.
And that was back in the 1920s. So he may have thought it was legal there, but I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what happened to all those wives and so on. Fortunately, he only had 1 child, and she was with his first marriage. So
Wow, that's a lot to unravel.
He was a character. So
you've had some interesting personal family research, that's for sure.
Oh, I do. And if it's not my family, it's my husband's. So
well, given that divorce records can be found as far back as 1682, I think you said, in Pennsylvania, how might the nature of divorce proceedings have changed over time? And what impact might that have on how we research them today?
Well, first, as I mentioned, state laws are not all the same. But one consistency is, so far, that the U.S. Constitution's full faith and credit clause requires that all states recognize marriages and divorces from the other states. Even though there have been challenges to this in recent years, it is still the law. However, there may be differences in a number of aspects of divorce, such as residence requirements. Usually at least one party must be a resident of the state. Some places, however, allow a relatively short residency period. Think of Las Vegas divorces with residencies of just 6 weeks since 1931. Causes and defenses. These vary over time depending on cultural and political changes. As early as 1969, many states began to recognize no-fault divorce, which is divorce by mutual agreement, sometimes noted as irreconcilable differences. But it still requires lawyers or referees or some such officials to create the legal paperwork necessary. Common causes used in contemporary divorces are often desertion, mental or physical cruelty, infidelity, and so on. These also vary by state and time period. Alimony is the legal obligation of a person to provide financial support to their spouse before or after marital separation or divorce. These rules also vary by time and place, and the details are negotiated and must be approved by the court. This is distinct from custody and child support, which is the legal obligation of a person to provide financial support to their children. Even if a spouse does not receive alimony, there will often be child support required until each child reaches the age of maturity. That's now usually 18 in most states, but has varied everywhere from 14 to 21, sometimes different for sons versus daughters. So you need to find out what it was at that time. Custody is who will have the responsibility of the physical maintenance of the children. This is called the custodial parent. In court records, it may be shown as the guardian. Even though it may be the birth parent, a guardian could be appointed as someone else. Property rights are not always a 50-50 split. Some states, like California, have a community property law which divides all property acquired during marriage equally. However, even this considers property brought to the marriage by each partner, which is nowadays often confirmed by a prenuptial agreement specifying these assets go back to the appropriate spouse. In non-community property states, this is a negotiation for distribution of assets, which must be approved by the court, as with alimony. Where to find divorce records depends on the state where the parties resided at the time of filing, not the place of marriage. Look for the state laws at the time to see if the parties may sue for divorce. Sometimes they can't. Where that's done, what the requirements and procedures are, and where the records, if publicly available, are filed. Locating records from different times is sometimes tricky. Here are a few guidelines. Early divorce records from the 1600s to the 1800s are often difficult to locate because they're usually found only in legislative records, church records, or colonial court proceedings. Divorces in this time were not a common occurrence and often were either strictly a church matter or required legislative approval. Researchers may need to look at state archives or court documents. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. In the 19th and early 20th century, as divorces became more common, county courts became the primary keepers of those records. Some states kept centralized registries, making records easier to track. Use card catalogs at Ancestry or Family Search to see if they've been digitized for the public. If not, contact the county to see what their rules are. In some cases, you may need to go in person. Some may be available by mail. Some may have a website. And some may just be locked and unavailable except by court order. From the mid-20th century to the present, in some places, privacy laws have restricted access to recent divorce records. Some states have divorce records as public records. Others are very strict. Researchers may need court permission, proof of relation, or specific requests to access them. Look for your specific location for the guidelines. Check the requirements in that jurisdiction and time of interest.
Isn't it always like 72 years?
They're all different. One place I saw was 150. So,
whoa. Okay.
As I mentioned, I was able to obtain 1970s divorce documents, which were publicly available in 2005 in Ohio.
Oh, wow.
In other states, it was more a matter of finding the record in a state index or register, possibly then being able to request more detail. But some actual divorce decree was not available in any conditions. It varies widely, and you should be ready to check the state's laws for the time in question to see if they may be available, or look at the state or county website to see if there's a listing for divorce records. It may take some searching, but it's worth a try.
Mm-hmm.
You might ask the county archives if these records are available. Another place to check for where the records may reside is the excellent research wiki on FamilySearch.org. It's easiest to go to the locality, country, state, or county. Then look for the topic of divorce. Read about the information, then follow the links to see what's available. And this is on Family Search, and they link to other sites as well. Look for the acts valid at the time in question. A few helpful aids. First place you should always go is Cindy's List. This is an invaluable resource for genealogical research. Cindy Ingle has been compiling lists of websites with information useful for family history research since before 1995. At that time, she presented a one-page list to a genealogical society meeting. It went over so well that she then created her website that year, which has now grown to over 300,000 links in 231 categories, which she personally maintains daily. Look for the marriage and divorce category with over 1,600 links in 11 subcategories. And make sure you spell it correctly. It's CYNDISLIST.com. If you spell Cindy wrong, you don't get the right list. Genealogy and the Law, A Guide to Legal Sources for the Family Historian, is a book by Kay Haviland Freilich and her husband, William B. Freilich. It's available from heritagebooks.com or as a Kindle ebook on Amazon. And it gives some history on the law for genealogists. It's a good basic research book. Debbie Maisala, Miesdala, has a website with a law library for genealogy on her website, which is called advancinggenealogist.com. Look for law special topics, which is her law library index with links to historic statutes and related materials. About half the states are currently represented, and she's adding more as time permits. For example, Iowa has links to the law journals from 1891 to 2001, the historic Iowa statutory law page, and a blog post about them from 1838 to the present, links to articles on specific topics, and many of these are from HathiTrust and Internet Archive, which, by the way, HathiTrust, HATHI Trust, and Internet Archive are excellent places to search for old or out-of-print publications, or just out-of-copyright protection works. Just search for divorce to get an idea of what's available, then narrow your search to find what you need. And the U.S. statutes at large are found in the Law Library of Congress, which is at www.loc.gov/century-of-lawmaking. These are all laws and statutes of the federal government. You can drown there in data for a long time. For a specific state, I suggest starting with Google and putting in the name of the state, law on divorce, and the year I'm looking for. Look at the results carefully, since many are going to be ads for divorce lawyers looking for business. But I often will find something of interest in the list, which may be an article about divorce laws changing in that year or something like that. So it's a good way to find things.
Very cool. Thank you for that information. You mentioned that marriage records can contain information about previous divorces. What are some of the most informative details that can be found on marriage records related to previous marital history?
Yes, marriage records may contain information. Early records may only have the names of the parties, but over time, other questions were added. Even from the earliest records, watch the name of the bride. It may be a married name rather than a maiden name. This becomes more obvious if her father's name is given, since it will probably be different. Some marriage license applications ask for the number of the marriage of each party. If there's anything other than a 1 in that space, investigate. I ran across one just this week that she had been married 3 times. This was her 3rd marriage and his 2nd. But in that particular state, I believe it was Montana, the marriage application also asked how the previous marriage ended. It would either be death or dissolution, which is divorce. And in this case, it also gave the county in which the divorce was granted and the name of the prior spouse and the date of the dissolution.
Oh, cool.
So read everything carefully. You may get a real bonus. I didn't get her first marriage dissolution, but if I go to the second one, I should find it there. But it's not always that way. Sometimes there are lots of things that can be wrong on a document. And in one person's story, I found problems in several documents. I want to tell you what I found and what I had to do to find the whole story, I think, because I think this will be instructive as to what was in the records and what was not in the records and how to get around those problems. This is the story of my great aunt Gwen. And remember, I mentioned Aunt Bessie and Uncle Kurt in Florida with the Quakers. Well, Aunt Bessie is Aunt Gwen's sister. I knew Aunt Gwen and Uncle George all my life. They both passed away after I was married. I maintain a Find a Grave memorial for Aunt Gwen. Someone else had created one previously for Uncle George when he passed away. One day I received a message from a woman looking for help on Uncle George's family. I'm not sure why she came to me, but I checked my file and found that I didn't have much on him. So I decided to look for his birth, death, and marriage documents to complete my file anyway. I didn't find a birth record for him, although I knew he was born in 1889 from the Social Security Death Index. His Find a Grave memorial had a birth for him in 1889 and gave his mother's married name, didn't list his father at all. So I thought, well, I'll go to the marriage record to see. I knew when they celebrated their anniversary because it was very close to mine, but I wasn't sure what county they married in. So I searched for his marriage record with Gwen using her maiden name, which unfortunately was Thomas, almost as bad as Smith. actually almost worse. And George's name, which was Peterson, so that wasn't much better. I didn't find the record. I proceeded on a rather involved trail to track down the problem. I tried searching for her mother, since the records I was finding around the expected year asked for that information, and she had the most unique name of the family. I found a record for Gwen with her maiden name, with her parents listed correctly, marrying somebody named Smith in 1950. Wonderful. Okay, so she had a first marriage. There were family rumors of it, but even her sisters didn't know who she had married. I searched again for her as Gwen Smith, found her, confirmed with her mother's name, but it still wasn't George. In 1920, she had married a man named E.R. Miriam, but the record got a bit goofy. It said it was a first marriage for both of them, and that it had her maiden name as Gwen Smith. Well, obviously, Smith was her married name from her first marriage. And it had her father as R.G. Smith. Her mother's name was Wright. I tried to imagine a scenario which would lead to this information. If the clerk filled out the application, he might have said, "What's your name?" Gwen Smith. What marriage number is this? First. So he wouldn't ask for her maiden name because obviously it would be Gwen Smith.
Yeah.
So what's your father's first name? R.G. Now, her father used his initials most of the time. She might even have said R.G. Thomas. He would think that's his first name. Since her name was Smith, it was her first marriage, so her father's name must have been Smith. So he wrote down her father's name as R.G. Smith. Okay, so now she's Gwen Miriam. So I searched for that. Finally, I found her marriage to Uncle George in 1927. Her first marriage had been 1915. She still said it was her first marriage. Her name and her mother were correct. Her name was Gwen Miriam. Her mother was correct. But now it showed her father as E.A. Miriam. That was her husband's name. I pictured this scenario. Clerk, what's your name? Gwen Miriam. What marriage is this for you? First. Again? Okay, if her surname was Miriam and it was her first marriage, her father's surname would be Miriam. So what's Mr. Miriam's first name? Did she wonder why he asked? She responded, yay. And that's what they wrote down. E.A. Miriam as her father. That wasn't her father, that was her husband. So her father didn't even get listed on her marriage to her third husband. But I finally had the information I needed on George. His information was partially correct. It had his name and his parents' names. It did unfortunately state it was also his first marriage. I later found it wasn't by tracking him through the censuses. But I was able to do minimal research on his family to get back to the lady on Find a Grave. Remember, that's where I started. And yes, her grandmother was a first cousin of George. Wow. I hate loose ends, so I researched the lives of all of Gwen's spouses and of George before their marriage. He was married before, so I researched his first wife's life before and after. They had a child who died in infancy. Now, I sometimes find that to be a contributing factor in divorce, separations, moves, any life changes, because that was so traumatic, especially for a first child. Mm. So maybe the parents were dealing with the loss differently and not able to reconcile, so they divorced. The most interesting thing I found, however, was Gwen. In researching her husbands, I found that she had a son with her first husband. The child did not die. The child stayed with him. The father didn't remarry. The father and son moved to California, where they lived with the father's divorced sister. The son never married, but lived a good, full, long life. I wanted to share this odyssey to show some of the pitfalls you may encounter in marriage records. Watch for these and other issues. Keep good notes. Record everything. And if it doesn't make sense, try to record why. Oh, and by the way, don't forget about that research record, writing down what you found, how you found it, where you found it, and what conclusions you drew from it in writing.
That's very important. Now, you described the importance of casting a broad net and researching all parties involved. What are some practical tips for staying organized and thorough during research that involves multiple individuals and their relationships?
Yes, that's a very good question because it's important to stay organized. Here's a few tips to help you stay on track and avoid some of those common pitfalls or errors. First, when looking for information, as Sean asked, cast a wide net. Don't miss things by not looking far enough. Don't limit your scope. Start broadly, then narrow it if necessary. And that's in every record that you look at. Not just newspapers, not just obituaries, not just death records, everything. Start broadly and narrow. Search all parties involved, not just the bride and groom. As seen with Gwen, something may be correct. I would never have found her without her mother's name. Her mother's name was Belle. So that was a little bit different, and I was able to find her. If one item looks out of place, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Look at it critically, determine what's right and what's wrong, then consider how it might have happened, as I did with Gwen. It's not to say that you're making up stories. I'm not saying that's how it happened. I'm just saying I determined it was feasible that the information came about that way. It may have been some other way, but that scenario fits with the facts. Once you feel you've found the solution, write a research report explaining the possible or definite basis for the inconsistencies. To help you keep on track, have a process. Always do things the same way. My husband and I developed a process where we started with, when we found a document, our process was that document immediately was logged into our computer database, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then we would make any extra copies of it we needed for scribbling on, which we often did. And then we would follow up on any leads that were in that document. So that was our process. You should also have a timeline for your person of interest. You may want to add events involving other parties, spouses, children, parents. This will give you ideas where you have gaps and where your research should lead you. Doesn't have to be fancy. I usually actually use a spreadsheet because that's how my mind works, so I can sort and resort. I include the date, place, event, comments, others involved, and where I obtained the information. In the case of Gwen, I would include each of her marriages, each of her divorces, and where I found her in each census. And I always find everybody in every census. Because in my process, I research at a minimum for each person, birth, marriage, death, burial, and every census in which they should be found, federal and state. Some states, notably Iowa, Kansas, and New York, have excellent censuses between the federal. My absolute favorite is Iowa 1925. It's 6 big sheets per person. So if you have anyone there, check it out. When you determine what you still need to find, create a research question. This should be specific enough to keep you focused, but include enough information to identify the party you're seeking and the event that you're investigating. For the cases I've discussed today, I would have several research questions, one for each marriage or spouse. As I discovered, there was possibly another one out there somewhere, another page. When you have answered that question, write out what you were seeking, what you found, where you find it. Always cite your sources so you can find it again, and how that answered your question. If it raises another question, create another research question and proceed. I also strongly suggest that you have a computer genealogy program on your own computer. Ancestry and family search have their purposes, but when you're researching your own family, you want to have total control over the information you find. So using the shared tree is not ideal. This also allows you to print reports, charts, and other information directly from your computer to keep information private. And it can be very helpful as your family tree grows. I keep small skeleton trees on Ancestry and Family Search just for DNA cousins. Another thing is continuing education. Right now, there are genealogy webinars available online nearly every day. There are also societies all over the world which have meetings in person and or online. Of course, you want to listen to Preservation Oaks to learn about other repositories that may be of interest for your research. I've been researching for 65 years, and I still learn something new nearly every day. I attend 2 or more webinars almost every week, and there are more that I would like to attend, but these are the ones that are most important for my current research. If you're going to research your family, do it to the best of your ability. Be patient, be thoughtful, be careful, be thorough. Most of all, remember that this is fun, but if it's worth doing well.
Diana, this has been incredibly insightful. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise. Before we let you go, are there any online resources or communities you'd recommend for our listeners?
Well, one that I mentioned earlier, and I do strongly recommend, is Cindy's List, because it'll lead you to lots of other things. I also like the research wikis on Family Search and the card catalogs on Family Search and Ancestry. National Archives website is a great starting point because it will let you dig into various record types like census or military records or whatever and start there. And it's free. So Family Search, Cindy's List, National Archives are all free sites. Don't underestimate the power of local historical societies and online genealogy forums. You can just Google the name of the county that you're looking at and see if they have a genealogy society. If they don't, try the historical society. Sometimes they merged, but start with genealogy. But there's so many passionate people out there who are happy to help. Genealogy is one of the fastest growing hobbies in the country, in the world, actually now. And watch for things like Roots Tech. That's Family Search, and it's free and it's online, and you can attend online webinars there. So look for all of that stuff.
Yeah, there's so many good things out there. Thank you for that information. Just to let the audience know, what new appearances or projects have you got going on right now?
Right now, it's kind of quiet. I have a lecture locally here next month, and then I have one in June and one in November for the National Danish American Genealogical Society, of which I'm a member. I had an article in the Family Tree magazine in the last issue about land records. So it's a little quiet right now, but that's okay. You can look on the Genealogical Speakers Guild site that you mentioned earlier and see what I'm up to. I try to keep my calendar there up to date, but it does give you my contact information if you want to ask.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Preservation Oaks. I sincerely appreciate your time, your generosity in sharing your expertise, and the work you do to help genealogists all the time. New and seasoned, it doesn't matter. You help them navigate the twists and turns of family history. Please do consider this podcast your friend and come back anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed the time here. You've been a very gracious host. So thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, we'll conclude our time with Diana Crisman Smith. Listeners, please stay tuned for my comments and wrap up, which is coming up next.
Are you ready to unlock the stories of the past and bring your ancestors to life? Whether you're a seasoned researcher or just beginning your genealogy journey, one speaker stands above the rest: Diana Crisman Smith. For over 4 decades, Diana has captivated audiences across the country with her expert knowledge and engaging storytelling. She's spoken at national and regional genealogy conferences, historical societies, and even on genealogy cruises. From uncovering lost family connections to understanding the secrets of Scandinavian ancestry, Diana's insights will inspire and empower you on your journey of discovery.
As a writer, educator, and professional genealogist, Diana has contributed to top genealogy publications, penned essential research guides, and taught countless researchers how to break through their biggest brick walls. Her presentations cover everything from beginner methodology to advanced research techniques, including Midwest research, Scandinavian ancestry, immigration records, and even cemetery discoveries.
Need a speaker for your next genealogy event, seminar, or workshop? Diana is available for both in-person and virtual presentations. making it easy to bring her expertise to your audience, wherever you are. Don't miss the opportunity to engage with one of the most respected voices in genealogy. Visit the Genealogical Speakers Guild at www.genealogicalspeakersguild.org. Search the members directory for Diana Crisman Smith and book her for your next event today. Diana Crisman Smith, helping you piece together your past one ancestor at a time.
And now, as promised, here's the conclusion of the classic James A. Fitzpatrick travel talk film from 1943 that showcases Reno during its heyday as a divorce haven.
The main theme of Reno life revolves around marriage or divorce, and it is interesting to learn that the wedding licenses issued here far exceed the number of divorces granted. Simplicity and lack of red tape have much to do with attracting romantic couples to Reno, where quick service at the celebrated Washoe County Courthouse gets the whole affair over with before the spirit of romance cools off. Up and down the steps of this famous courthouse go the feet of disillusioned divorcees, along with the feet of romantic couples seeking the happiness that the divorcees lost. Occasionally, a divorcee is met in the middle of the steps by a man who induces her to try again. In recent years, some odd customs have been taking root in Reno, and although they are not generally practiced, every now and then a gay divorcee revives the tradition of kissing a pillar of the courthouse, very much as the Blarney Stone is kissed in Ireland, for better luck the next time. Another freak custom, which may have originated in the brain of some press agent, is the stunt of the disillusioned bride dramatically tossing her belated wedding ring into the Truckee River as a symbol of complete severance from the marriage contract. And so life goes on in Reno, where marriage and divorce walk hand in hand, and respite from the cares of a troubled world may be found in the numerous nightclubs that flash their alluring lights as symbols of solace to some and flashes of gaiety to others. And it is with this thought that we say farewell to romantic Nevada.
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
Well, welcome back. What an incredible conversation with Diana Crisman Smith. Her passion for genealogy and decades of experience have given us powerful insights into tracing family histories, especially when it comes to uncovering elusive female ancestors. From navigating name changes to understanding the legal and emotional layers of divorce, she's equipped us with tools to tackle even the trickiest branches of our family trees. Divorce is a topic that often gets overlooked in genealogy, yet as we've seen, it presents both challenges and opportunities. And with rising divorce rates since the 1960s, tracking maternal lines is becoming even more complex. Future generations will struggle to piece together their past unless we take action now. Start preserving your family history. Record stories, gather documents, and organize photos. Don't let important details slip away, especially where divorce plays a role in your family. Take the time to document names, relationships, and life events that might otherwise be lost to future generations. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to send your thanks to Diana Crisman Smith for sharing her vast knowledge, insights, and expertise with us. I'm sure she'd love to hear from anyone that this information helped. And please do let us know. Have you faced challenges tracing family history due to divorce? Do you have stories about how it shaped your family tree? Well, we'd love to hear them. If you'd like to learn more from Diana or bring her expertise to your event, find her in the Genealogical Speakers Guild directory or reach her directly at talkgenealogy@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to The Divorce Dilemma, the impact of divorce on genealogy. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it helpful. And if you're interested in being a guest or have questions, just email us at preservationoaks@gmail.com. Now onward to our next episode of Preservation Oaks. On our next episode, we'll be chatting with Bobby Mathis, president of the Union City Society for Historic Preservation, located in Union City, Michigan. They maintained the Hammond House, a Greek Revival home circa 1840, which contains furnishing and other items related to the Union City, Sherwood, and Burlington areas. The society was created circa 1985 by Dorothy and Dave Evert. The Union City Society for Historic Preservation is an organization dedicated to preserving and promoting the historical and cultural heritage of Union City, Michigan. The society works to identify, protect, and maintain historical landmarks, buildings, and sites within the community. The overall goal is to ensure that future generations can appreciate and learn from the unique history of the area. That should be a good episode, so stay tuned. Okay, that's a wrap for this episode. Music used today is from Cymbalbird, Bass Part Out, iCentury, S Audio, Flutist, Sound Roll, and Scott Holmes. Microstream Radio is a registered trademark. You can visit us at www.microstreamradio.com. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted by Microstream Radio. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere without the written permission of Microstream Radio. Hopefully, you all found today's episode useful, informative, and thought-provoking. And if so, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks to everyone for listening. Stay curious and keep exploring the incredible stories that shape our world. This is Sean Radcliff. We'll see you all next time on Preservation Oaks. And until then, keep on giving and keep on living the good life.